So we are in the worksheet named Sheet 3. We'll be considering the same range D5 to D18 as we had considered in our previous session. We also have the VBA editor open, wherein we are currently in module 2. We have written a new macro subroutine named useful underscore range underscore properties underscore methods. So we'll be demonstrating the use of this property range.cells and the methods range.offset and range.resize. We'll also be trying multiple variations of using this property and methods by also using the read-only properties such as range.rows.count, range.columns.count, range.worksheet.name, and range.address. Now we shall declare a range variable, let's say RR1, dim RR1 as range. To this range variable RR1, we shall assign the range D5 to D18 of the worksheet name Sheet 3. Note that this Sheet 3 is the name of the worksheet, and it also appears in the VBA editor within the parenthesis. So, and further, we shall be applying the properties range.cells and the methods range.offset and range.resize onto this variable RR1, and the output will also be a range. To assign that output, we need another range variable. So let's dim RR2 as range. So currently we have two variables, that is RR1 and RR2 of the type range. So both these lines, both these ways of assigning a range to a variable works. However, the moment you change this particular sheet name that is getting displayed in the Excel window, our first method of assigning the range to the variable, it fails. So I would in fact recommend to go ahead with this second method, and this would be the revised method of assigning a range to a range variable. So let me comment out the first three lines of code. So with that, we shall move on to our next method, which is the range.resize. So using the range.resize method, we can change the number of rows and the number of columns that a particular range object or a variable refers to. It is basically resizing a range variable. Let us understand that in the context of the range variable RR1, to which we have assigned the range location D5 to D18 in the worksheet titled sheet_3. Now, if I were to resize this range variable RR1 to have 4 number of rows and let us say 3 number of columns. The resized range output that is expected shall be this, wherein I have 4 number of rows and 3 number of columns. And this resizing is happening with the very first cell of the range object being considered as the base. So any resizing is happening, any expansion that is happening is starting from this very first cell of the range variable RR1. So every time you're adding a row, the expansion is happening along this direction, or the contraction is happening along this direction till you can reduce it no further, that is, till you are reduced to the very first cell of the range object. Similarly, every time you're increasing or you're resizing the number of columns, the expansion will be happening along this direction. So let us consider the instance of resizing the variable RR1 to have 4 number of rows and 3 number of columns. And let us assign the resized range to the variable RR2. So let us use the set statement. Set RR2 equal to RR1 dot resize, wherein I have to enter 2 arguments. The first one is the row size and the second one is the column size. In our particular use case, the row size will be 4 and the column size will be 3. Let me copy these 2 lines of code and paste it over here. Let me insert a toggle breakpoint over here. And now we are ready to run our macro and verify whether our understanding of resizing a range object is correct or not. So let us run our macro. So right now we are at this location. The active cell has changed and now we are about to apply the .resize method onto the range object RR1. So let me execute this line. Now we'll be selecting the range location that has been assigned to the range variable RR2. So here it is. We were able to select and assign this particular range location to the variable RR2 using the .resize method on the range variable RR1. Let me clean the code. Let me remove this toggle breakpoint. So now we are so we had entered in this particular line of code, when we had applied the .resize method on a range object, we had entered the row size as 4 and the column size as 3. Now, is it possible to enter 0 as the row size argument? Although it does not make sense. Let us see how the VBA editor reacts to it. So let me copy these lines of code and let me enter the row size as 0. Let us also try to see if the row size and the column size arguments can be negative numbers or not. So let me copy these lines of code and paste it over here, and now I will change the row size argument in the .resize method as let us say -1 to keep things simple. Let me insert the toggle breakpoint over here so that we can directly resume from this line onwards. Now, so what exactly I am trying to do? I am trying to check if the row size or the column size arguments can be 0 or if it can be negative. So let us run our macro and verify whether that is possible or not. So we are about to execute this line. So it returns an error. There's a runtime error 1004. So it indeed does not make sense, and same has been returned by the VBA code. So let us close this tab and let me comment it out, because this will otherwise return an error. Now we shall verify whether -1 as an input works with the .resize method or not. So let us rerun our macro. So we are currently at this line. Active cell has changed. Now we are about to execute the .resize method with a negative number as the row size argument. Again, so it is. So this returns an error as well. So this is an important point to note, that the .resize method onto a range object accepts only positive numbers as the valid arguments. So let me end this error tab. Let me clean the code by removing this toggle breakpoint, and let me insert a toggle breakpoint over here. Let me in fact remove, comment out these lines of code, since they will return an error. And let me insert a toggle breakpoint over here. Now there will be certain situations. Let us consider another situation where we have this particular range variable RR1, and we want to resize it to have 2 more additional rows. So I want a new range object that has 2 additional rows vis-a-vis the range variable RR1. So this is a very interesting use case where I can use the read-only properties range.rows.count. So let me show you how. So let us enter the row size argument as RR1 dot rows dot count plus 2, and let me enter the column size argument as RR1 dot columns dot count. So before running our code, let us understand what exactly should happen. So since the row size argument is rr1.rows.count plus 2, and we know that the base from where the resizing will start is the very first cell of the range object rr1. So from this cell onwards, the expansion along the row axis will start, and the expansion along the column axis will start from this cell along this direction. So since the row size argument is rr1.rows.count, so right now we are over here, plus 2, which implies 2 additional rows, so we are over here. And since columns.count is the value is 1 for rr1 range object, so there is no additional expansion along the columns direction. So this is our expected range output from this particular line of code. Let us run our macro and verify if it is indeed the case. So let me clean our code and let me run the macro. So right now we are at this particular location. Let us step into our code. Now we are about to resize the range variable rr1. Now we'll be selecting the range location assigned to the variable rr2, and so it is. Our original range rr1 plus 2 additional rows have been assigned to the range variable rr2. This is a very interesting use case of using the read-only properties .rows.count and .columns.count. Let me clean our code again. Let me remove the toggle breakpoint from here and insert the toggle breakpoint over at this place. and let me reset our macro. So let's rephrase what we have learned till now. So we have learned to use the dot resize method, wherein we can enter positive integers as arguments to the row size and the column size, and we can use the read-only properties dot rows dot count and dot columns dot count. To add onto it further, till now, whenever we had applied the dot resize method, it has been to the entire range, which meant that the base for resizing has always been the very first cell of the range variable RR1. Now let's consider a case where we want the resizing of the range to happen not from the first cell but from this particular cell, whose row index with respect to the range object RR1 is 4, and the column index with respect to the range object RR1 is 1. So this is the particular location from wherein I want to start the resizing to happen. And for that, I'll be using the dot cells property of a range. So let us do that in the code. So let me copy these few lines of code. Since we want the resizing to start from this particular cell, which is having the row index S4, so when I will insert the dot cells over here and pass the argument 4 as the row index and the column index as 1 dot resize. Since we want to, let's say, resize our range starting from this particular base and have the same number of rows as the range object RR1, so let me keep RR1 dot rows dot count as the row size argument, and the column size argument shall remain same as the RR1.columns.count. So let us run this macro and see if the assignment to RR2 is as per our expectation or not. So let us run the macro. We are at this location. Now we are about to assign to apply the dot cells property followed by the dot resize method. So here it is. Now the resizing of the range has happened from the 4th cell of the particular range object RR1. So this is a very interesting use case wherein I have used the dot resize method on top of the dot cells property onto a range object. Now this is possible because the output from applying the dot cells property is a range. The output from applying the dot resize method as well as the dot offset method will also be a range. So we can apply these properties and methods on top of each other in succession using the dot operator. And so we have covered a lot of ground on the range.resize method. This is good enough to get us started up and running. We now look forward to our next session on range.read-only properties.